Welcome back to What the Fact. I'm Katie and this is Erin.
We're going to continue now our look at the big midterm elections that are going to happen just in over a month. And we're staying close to home. We're talking about Florida. We're here at PolitiFact based at the Poynter Institute in St. Petersburg, Florida. Katie covered Florida politics. I've covered Florida politics. We fact-checked a lot of these politicians. And now we're talking about the Florida Senate race. Really one of the more crucial battleground races between now and November at Pitts. Florida's two-term incumbent Republican governor, Rick Scott, versus the Bill Nelson, who was first elected to the U.S. Senate in 2000, in the battle of kind of the two tallest, skinniest guys running for Senate that we've seen in a while. They tend to be a little awkward on the campaign trail, but they also have a huge support and following in a race that is really kind of devolved into personal attacks and attacks on their records. We've seen plenty of claims about Bill Nelson being a do-nothing career politician. Rick Scott has had to answer for some of the decisions he made, particularly early in his administration when he was trying to balance a budget, made big cuts in a lot of areas across the state. He's also had to answer, quite frankly, for his time as a healthcare executive, where his companies faced huge Medicare fines. And so it's an interesting race where a lot of money and a lot of eyeballs certainly are. The two candidates had their first debate last week in Miami. It was in Spanish. Well, they spoke in English, but it was aired in Spanish. So we're going to talk through that a little bit. But we're also going to talk about a claim here, setting it up first, that Rick Scott has made about Bill Nelson, and basically using a Red Scare tactic and calling Bill Nelson a socialist. That's a term that some Democrats might wear with honor, maybe Bernie Sanders and others, but does it apply to Bill Nelson? All right, Katie, you've covered both these guys. Rick Scott is calling Bill Nelson a socialist. The facts really don't bear that out. How do we rate it?
Well, for all the name calling we've heard from them over the years, this one was new and it was not accurate. So we got our worst rating of pants on fire. Bill Nelson is not a socialist. That term has real meaning and resonates, especially here in Florida, where you have so many people who are really come to Florida to escape socialist regimes. Yeah. So it's a really serious charge. It's one we've heard in Florida's other premier race and the governor's race too. But to lob it against Bill Nelson is especially misleading. He doesn't fit the definition. And when we talk to political experts around the state, they pointed out that most of Bill Nelson's policy positions would actually be considered quite conservative compared to other democratic socialist European countries, right, the wealthier countries. So the Scott campaign did try to back this up. It was kind of humorous, frankly, because one of their pieces of evidence was that Bill Nelson supported raising taxes more than 300 times. Yeah. Well, this was amusing to us because we had already debunked that claim that Rick Scott made in a campaign commercial.
Oh, fact checkers humor.
To look at another key Senate race this midterm election, venture with us to the state of Florida. That's where incumbent Democratic Senator Bill Nelson is fighting a challenge from the state's Republican Governor Rick Scott. Scott's campaign is attacking Nelson on his lengthy record in Washington, including his votes that favored higher taxes.
What's Nelson done all those years? 349 times he's voted for higher taxes.
Whoa, that's a lot of votes for higher taxes. And it's a very unreliable number. It needs a lot of context. Almost half of the 349 figure includes Nelson's votes on non-binding budget resolutions, which just set parameters for what should be considered in tax and spending law. Those votes don't count toward the passage or rejection of a bill that would become law. That number also counts multiple votes for the same bill, which is common as lawmakers tack on amendments. To the Scott campaign, that might count as voting multiple times for a tax increase. But it's important to note that not all those votes counted towards separate tax increases. In short, the 349 number is very misleading. It includes multiple votes for the same bill and a lot of votes for resolutions that would never actually become law.
We rated that false. This is a fake number that Scott's campaign has really latched on to. Basically, it double counts votes for the same bill. It also counts votes for non-binding budget resolutions that did not have the effect of raising taxes at all. So that isn't a solid piece of evidence to back up that he's a socialist. And they also tried to compare him to Andrew Gillum, the Democratic candidate for governor in Florida. Aaron, they sent us a Miami Herald article.
Right.
But again, it did not support their point because the entire article is about how he and Nelson are different.
Exactly. So Gillum, generally, who's running for governor against Ron DeSantis, a Florida congressman who's been endorsed by Donald Trump. Gillum has generally a more progressive agenda. He's essentially called for abolishing ICE. He wants to replace it within the Department of Justice. Nelson hasn't said that. Gillum also has called for supporting Medicare for all. Nelson hasn't come out in support of that.
All right, there's a lot more that you can read.
We could talk about Florida all day, right?
Yeah, it's a passion.
But we got to end it there. So
all right.
We will see you next week where we're going to talk more about Donald Trump, another Senate race, and we'll be amped up because we'll be 1 week closer to Election Day.
All right, see you next time.
See ya.